Hi, and welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Good morning, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
And we are happy to welcome back with us from Sweden, Michael Sena, consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher. Great to see you again, Michael.
Pleasure to be here, as always.
Very nice.
Well, the November issue of The Dispatcher has arrived, and this one is electrifying. The headline in the lead article, "The Coming Battle Over Car Electrification." And the subheadline reads, "Energy Shortages, a sign we have been moving too fast in the wrong direction." Let's start out with a little bit of an overview, Michael. I don't know how you do a little bit on this. It's a big article.
Well, those who have been following the articles I've been reading have been writing about energy, electric cars, are familiar with the fact that I believe that we focus too quickly and too much on battery electric vehicles to the exclusion of other technologies. The purpose of this article, the reason that I wrote this article, and particularly now, is that next week or on Sunday this weekend, there is the UN climate conference COP26, which is taking place in Glasgow, and this gathering should have taken place last year. It was postponed because of COVID, and now they're coming together to discuss where the status of where everyone is on the promises that they made in Paris 5 years ago, and what's happening now, what's happened, and what looks like it should be happening in the future. Just a few weeks before this is going to take place in Europe, principally in the United States, but also in other places like China, people have noticed that the energy that should be coming out of electric plants and the oil that should be coming into gasoline and diesel and other petroleum products is in very short supply, as well as gas. And it turns out that the main reason for the short supply is that the increased emphasis that we've placed over the last half dozen years on renewable energy, primarily solar and wind, doesn't always provide us with the energy that we need, because the wind doesn't always blow as much as we'd like it to, and the sun doesn't always shine in the places that we would very much like it to. And so we've had a shortage. And combined with the fact that companies, oil companies, gas exploration companies, have been forced through the markets and through the governments to reduce the amount of exploration that they've been doing, has meant that there are severe shortages of the fuels that have been fueling us for all of these years. At the same time that the fuels that we've needed, the sustainable fuels, so-called sustainable fuels, that are supplanting these, or should be, are not performing as well. And even worse, the one source of energy that we have had, which is both, in many views, non-emissions, develops no emissions, nuclear energy, has been shut off by countries, particularly countries that need the energy. Germany, we're doing the same thing in Sweden, but in many places in the world. So people are going now to Glasgow where they're going to be, the people who are attending there are going to be saying, we need to be doing more of what we have said we were going to do, which is shutting off nuclear plants, closing down coal electrification, stopping the cars that burn gasoline and diesel, and supplanting those with electric cars, while all of the sources that we have that we need to have in order to do this aren't performing. And what I've said here is that we're in this situation because some group of people, and primarily those who are going to be attending this conference, have just made the decision that this is the way that we should be doing this. This is the direction that we should be going in, and this is the speed at which we should be moving. We have to do this by 2030, by 2040, by 2050. Otherwise, the world isn't going to be the world that we knew, and we're not going to be able to live here anymore. And what I've tried to do is to say, we're not getting to where we need to get to, not only because we've made these decisions which were not necessarily based in all of the facts that we need to be looking at, but the people who are most affected by this haven't really had any say. It's been a completely top down from the standpoint of making decisions, and bottom up, mostly, I'd say mostly teenage bottom up, with lots of people in the academic circles and the non-governmental organizations, climate environmental organizations, saying we have to do it this way, we can't do it any other way, and if you don't do it our way, we're going to be in a position where we can't do anything by 2030 because it'll be too late, and by 2050 we're not going to be able to live on the planet anymore. We might as well all just close up shop and go away. No one believes that that's the case. No one believes that that's the case, but they're making that as the argument in order to get people to move faster and more diligently toward the solution that they've chosen. The political situation in the United States is such that we can't make decisions, whether it's to decide to fix the bridges, or how we're going to deal with COVID, or anything else, because we've divided ourselves up into these groups, which I've used in the article, George Packard, into these groups that are unable to communicate with each other, unable to cooperate with each other, and unable to make decisions that can effectively take this problem and break it down into its components and say, we can solve this if we work together. There's no working together in the United States. And the same situation exists in other places, particularly in Great Britain, where we have groups of people who are on different sides of the fence. And in this case, in the United States, these four different groups that George Packard has defined, that's making it impossible to cooperate in a way that we can define solutions that are realistic, that are doable, that everyone agrees can be done, and then to work toward those together.
It doesn't sound like you're saying that the climate science is necessarily off here, but you're talking about not looking at the full breadth of potential solutions.
Well, correct. You're absolutely correct. I'm not a climate. I'm not saying that the climate is that global warming is not occurring. I'm not saying that at all. We know it is. We can see it. It's obvious that all of the signs are there. But what I am saying is that we've chosen a solution or a set of solutions which, if we don't do those, if we don't implement these solutions, the groups who are making the greatest amount of noise and the people who are coming to this COP26 are saying, this is what we have to do. We have to make all cars electric. Well, where is the electricity coming from? We know where it's coming from in China. It's 60% of it is made with coal. We know where it's coming from in Germany and Poland and many parts of the United States. At the same time as we're saying we shouldn't be taking the carbon out of the ground and using that and burning it in order to generate electricity, because we're going to need this electricity to do everything that between making steel and making concrete and making electricity to do everything that we need to do with our computers. That electricity has to be generated somehow. And to say that we're going to be using solar and wind and even hydroelectricity from water, these are climate sensitive. We have a problem with the climate, and we're using climate sensitive methods in order to solve the problem. And then we wonder, oh, gee, that's too bad that the wind didn't blow as much as it should have. Well, maybe we'll fix it next year. Maybe it'll blow more. But then, then we don't have any way of dealing with the wind blowing more or the solar power. We have places where we need energy. Sweden's a very good example. We have lots of wind up north. We have lots of hydroelectricity up north. We have 4 times the price of electricity in the southern part of Sweden versus in the northern part of Sweden. And it's in the southern part of Sweden where everybody lives. These kind of situations that we get ourselves in. And then on top of that, where we have a very good energy source in nuclear power, which is stable, it works. And the knee-jerk reaction of Angela Merkel, she's done a decent job, but there are lots of things. One of the things that she hadn't done is just unilaterally decide we're going to shut off all of our nuclear power. Angela, you burn a lot of coal. What are you going to do to replace the coal? Well, we don't know. But we're also going to close down our coal mines, because that's not good either. And I want to look good when I come to these UN meetings. I want to be, the important person who's made all of the good things. And the politicians are making these kinds of moves, and they're getting all of the kudos. But who's dealing with this? Who's living with these situations? Who's freezing and who's too hot when it's boiling, and who's too cold when it's so very, 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 very cold. It's normal people, and nobody's voted on this. Nobody said, yeah, we agree on this. And the coming battle is the same kind of battle that's going on right now in the US with just about everything. You've got folks who are, with the former guy. You've got folks who are with the other Republicans. You've got all the smart Alecs like us who think we know all of the answers, the smart. And then you've got this other group who now called the just Americans, who want everybody to have everything that they could possibly have. And they're making part of this, the climate, it's part of their argument. But even they are in a situation where they're pushing a solution, but they don't have anyone, they don't have enough people behind them. And when it comes to the point where people are going to have to stop driving their cars, and they're going to have to start turning down the thermostats, or turning up the temperature instead of going down on their air conditioning systems, people are going to start to say, no, we didn't vote for this. This isn't what we want. This isn't what we wanted. You haven't ever asked us, and we don't want to go there.
And you're talking about there's going to be a backlash. Obviously, if that happens, there would be.
We've already had, how much more of a backlash could we possibly have had than January 6th? How can we, this wasn't the one-off thing. This is something that, I was over here and I was scared to death about what's going on there, And then you see somebody on television, this person is being shot through a door, and the person dies. This is in our Congress. People sitting in the senators' offices with their feet up on the desk. I can't understand why all of these people aren't already in jail. I guess it's because we have a really good judicial system where we go through the process, methodically, and eventually everybody who's done things wrong. But talk about talk about a backlash. You start taking away our cars.
Uh,
You telling me that I've got to start using an electric scooter to round up the sheep. Come on.
but
Yes.
Michael, um, isn't the marketplace somehow going to deal, or let's say rear its ugly head on this thing? I mean, we went through the pandemic with the logistics system working, I mean, phenomenally well. About the only thing we ran out of was toilet paper. And when we ran out of toilet paper, we went nuts. But somehow, I went to Costco all during that. And, at one point they limited the number of chickens, that roasted chickens I could buy to 2, and I almost freaked out. And and I was first in line to get some toilet paper, so I bought enough so that my neighbors could have some too. This is in the bubble, but we're about to face another one with respect to, it's going to be interesting this Christmas, because if you're not buying your Christmas presents now, I don't know what Black Friday, there's not going to be any, I don't know, at least some people are saying, I mean, all the ships are backed up at Long Beach. Nothing's hitting the docks, I don't know.
Everything from toys to electronics.
If you go to, my broker just bought a Rivian, and I asked them, when is it being delivered? There's no delivery date. Oh my, I mean, when's the last time we bought cars in which there was no delivery dates? Now, of course, he probably has 8 other cars in his garage, so he doesn't really need it. But the price of cars right now around here is like, if you can get one at manufacturer's suggested retail price, you'd probably and get it today. I mean, the shortage there. And what hasn't hit yet is, I think that the perception out there is that the electricity to propel the electric car is free. Now, whether or not that's an Elon thing that he did, it's brilliant if he did it. I mean, if you're creating a new product, you want the perception of the product to be free. I tell in my class, I used to look at ads for new cars. They'd say you get $15,000 cash if you buy it. Okay, I wanted to buy 10, I get $150,000. I become rich guy. Sure. They of course don't focus on, okay, you had to pay 60. But I mean, well, it's just the way the marketplace works. They want to put on the customer the perception that it's really cheap, while they're picking all the money out of your wallet. I mean, it's fair. That's fair.
It's fair, but the fact is that they did this in order to get more and more people to buy them, because nobody knew how much it was going to cost to operate them. And now it turns out, and this was in the last issue of the Dispatcher, it turns out that these cars are more expensive, because he was saying, once you buy this, you have no cost. Electricity, you don't see the cost of electricity. How much is electricity, right? You plug your car in, the car you're running, so you're not. And by the way, if you go out there and drive your car on the road and you use one of our supercharging stations, it's free. Well, he had to stop doing that, but initially it was free. It's all free. I mean, everything is free.
Right. And I mean, that's fair in a marketplace. I mean, you're allowed to promote the positives of your product and provide incentives. It's done all the time. I mean, it's part of, hey, if call that capitalist, call that whatever you want. I
call it lying.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you do, buyer beware. You always know buyer beware. I mean, okay. What I'm trying to get to is that there is a perception right now that electricity is really cheap. Now, when I grew up, which is almost the time when you grew up and almost the time when Fred grew up. I mean, the thought electricity was really expensive. And the thought of heating your home was expensive. And the thought of air conditioning your home was expensive, or maybe because we had no money. And now I happen to have maybe 2 nickels to rub together, but not more. But the perception was electricity was expensive. What has been done lately is to make the concept, the perception that electricity is cheap. And it's pervasive over everything. You know, we're going to now use electricity to do things because it's so inexpensive in part, plus it does all the other things. At some point, the electric utilities are going to be at capacity. They probably are right now. And as we know, when things hit capacity, what happens to the price? The price just, I mean, at some point, they're going to raise the price. Now they're regulated and so on and so forth and efforts and whatever, but the price is going to go up. Why? Just all the things that you said, supply demand. The demand on this is going to be so great that the supply, when you turn off the nuclear, when you turn off the coal, the supply like drops. I mean, look at the Lawrence Livermore energy charts. I mean, that's all you need to look at.
But we've seen it. We don't have to project,
no,
Alan.
But
we see it now.
You see it.
No,
you might see it. Fred might see it. Fred Dreyer might see it. The consumer right now, the policymakers right now, the people perceive the electricity to be free. Okay. At some point, free means enormous consumption. At some point, supply demand hits this thing, and when it hits it, it is going to be chaos.
What about what about those who point out that the solar panel costs have come down and will continue to come down, and if we equip
the problem with all those things, it takes too long. It takes a long time to get something substantial out there. You know, I went out to ride a steam coal-fired steam locomotive on Friday, and in Iowa. And you know, there are windmills all over all the farms. I think that, you know, farmers are probably getting more revenue from the windmills than they are from their corn. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't looked at it, but they're all over the place. And even with that all over the place, I don't know how you can stick more in there, but maybe you can. But all that takes time. But still, if you look at the amount of wind energy that's generated to go out and go replace the nuclear, replace the coal, replace the oil, and it's out in Iowa. There's nobody there, as Michael said. How do you get it to Jersey? Okay,
I think they're going all over Jersey with windmills. Yeah. I believe
there's not going to be a windmill in Princeton. I'll tell you that. I mean, I don't believe it. I mean, I said, geez, we don't have a cell tower. I don't think. I mean, you know, whatever.
I'm going to return to the article. My point in the article, and the reason that I used George Packer and his analysis, his points of analysis, was to try to identify the main cause for why we're not going to be able to have a rational discussion about this, to make rational decisions which everyone can live with, and where we can continue to have a society that's based on growth. If everyone is willing, if everyone decides we don't want a society based on growth, we want to have 1.5 degree increase by 2050, then everyone is going to have to, essentially, everyone is going to have to do what many places did during COVID, which is essentially shut down. The only services that were available were emergency services. And even that, even with those shutdowns, with people not driving their cars, with people who are at home, And the result of people being at home was, instead of having the heating bills and the electric and the cooling bills in places of work, we just increased the amount of energy that we were using in our houses. We weren't driving on buses, we were riding on buses and undergrounds and other sorts of things because of the danger. But we had to get to places, even emergency places. We had to get to those places. So we know what we need to do in order to get to 1.5, which is basically shut everything down. If you're going to shut everything down, your society is going to be a very different one than the one we have today. We wouldn't be having this discussion because we wouldn't have the electricity to spend on it. We wouldn't have any reason to have these discussions because we'd all be basically waiting for something else to happen. We wouldn't have any educational systems. We wouldn't have any reason for educational system. We're closing down shop. We're going to wait until everything gets back down to an absolute minimal level. And then maybe we can start thinking about starting over again. That's the situation that we're in right now. And we're forcing people to make that decision, but we're not communicating what the implications are. I don't think if you walk down the street in Princeton, you ask someone, do you know what's going on in Glasgow right now? And they'd probably 9 out of 10 would say, no, they don't. And if you said the person who said, yeah, I know what's going on there, they're having a discussion about, how we're going to solve the climate problem, and we have the solutions. All we have to do is implement those. What is that going to mean to your life? Are you going to be able to continue to use your computer, carry your telephone around? What does that really mean in real terms? And if you tell someone, what it means is that you're not going to be able to do what you've been doing. During COVID, we forced you to stay indoors in certain places, and look what's happened. We have riots in places like Germany, in places like Italy. People are rioting. I mean, the cost of fuel went up in France. How long did the yellow vest folks go out there and protest, but not nicely, everything will be okay. We're just going to give you a little information. They were out there saying, we're not going to pay this. We're not going to do this. And that's the situation that we're in right now. And our politicians are not doing their job. And the job that they need to do is to communicate to the people who are living in their societies, this is the situation. This is what we think is the right way to go. And if they say, all you need to do is buy electric cars and the problem is solved, that is not very responsible.
Michael,
What should be considered in Glasgow?
Let me. I want to get back a little bit to my comment with respect to the supply demand of the electricity issue, because we have yet to face a supply shortage on the electricity side, I believe. And I believe that I think I'm right in that. And at some point, how does one deal with shortage? One deals with shortage on a combination of price and rationing.
But wait a minute, Alain. We have brownouts.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Okay, so we have some, but the brownouts have been few and far between lately, and that is at this. The problem is the scale. Okay. The scale is such that as we shut down the nuclear and as we shut down the coal and we don't have the replacement energy, forget about the increased demand. Now there's even an increased demand because we're switching from petroleum to electricity. This is an enormous increase. I mean, again, I am so stuck on the Lawrence Livermore charts. In COVID year, we went down 7% in the total energy consumption in the United States. That's essentially a complete shutdown, as you as you pointed out, but a shift in where a lot of the energy was consumed. More energy was consumed at home than in the office and in the other place. But even that enormous shutdown that we all put up with, that we all, hated. There isn't a person that loved it. It all disrupted our lives. That was only in the US a 7% reduction in the amount of energy that we used. A complete, almost disruption of our lifestyles. Okay.
Are you saying it was only, it disrupted it amazingly, but it was only 7%? What would happen if it was 10% or 50%? Is that what you're saying?
Or no, I am saying that disruption caused a decrease of 7%. The introduction of any substantial amount of electric vehicles, the shutdown of coal, the shutdown of nuclear, draws from the whole system much more than 7% reduction in availability of electricity. That now needs to be produced something with some other way. Okay. And I'm suggesting that there's, I see no way in the short term for either the wind or solar or water being able to come up in any fast way to compared to the shutdown. It can't.
It cannot.
And so therefore the supply of energy reduces. So even if we reduce ourselves to COVID activity, we aren't able to reduce our activity enough to make up for now the non-availability of the electricity. So then at this point, what do we do? Okay. Demand is much greater than supply. Okay. Even if we reduce some of our demand, but because we've so curtailed the supply, which we can shut off coal plants instantly. We can shut off nuclears instantly. We can, because of that reduction, now there's an enormous shortage of electricity. So what do? We have the brownouts. So we selectively decide you don't get it. Okay. We then can price it. Oh my goodness, but then there's regulatory oversight over that. So how much is that going to happen? So, it's not there. So therefore, complete blackouts. And if there is that to a substantial amount, then I don't know, you have more things that happen in Washington. I don't know. Tell me, how do you deal with that?
We totally agree. The situation that we've created and are continuing to create and foster is not sustainable. So, Fred, you asked what should we do? First of all, we should stop turning off nuclear. Second, we should stop this insanity of saying you can't drive your cars. We're going to ban ICE vehicles. We have the methods and we're developing the methods to reduce the amount of emissions. That's the goal. The goal isn't to turn off nuclear plants, and the goal isn't to stop cars with driving on gasoline. The goal is to reduce the emissions. I mean, we have to focus on what the objective is here. If you're saying, we're out on the street and the reason that we're protesting is to get cars off the streets. Well, that's another protest. That's something else. You want to do that, that's okay. But if the objective is to reduce the emissions, focus on that. We don't have any emissions with nuclear, but by shutting off nuclear, you're forcing us into a situation where we're using more coal. This is what's happened in China. China tried to shut off their coal electricity generation in time for COP26 to look good, and it turned out that they were in a terrible jam because they weren't generating enough electricity. So they had to start very quickly putting back the coal that they had taken out. We need to do that. We need to focus on getting with the fuels that we have right now of forcing more and more cleanness in those fuels. We were 10 years ago, we were doing a very good job, but then we started to say, well, we just stop all coal. And by saying we'll stop all coal, people stopped investing in making that coal clean. We were doing, I've pulled out some articles that I had saved from 12 years ago, where we were doing a really good job of cleaning the coal, of taking out the bad stuff from the coal that we're burning for electricity. The investments that we should be making in ensuring that we have the fuels that we need, the energy that we need, is the difference between 2050, 2051, 2060. That's not really important. The important thing here is to decide if we're going to close down society in order to achieve objectives which aren't the objectives that we should be achieving, which is make sure that we're not going over a certain temperature, and we can do that, but at the same time keep our societies running. Otherwise, we're killing ourselves. What's the point of keeping a society, keeping the planet, if nobody can live in it, because we've closed down everything that makes life worth living. Keep in mind, one thing to keep in mind is this is 200 years old. This started with the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
Before the Industrial Revolution, all that carbon was underground, whether it was coal or oil or gas, it was all under there. When we started to take these out and to be able to make those steam trains that Alain was running around in over the weekend, and that I love as well. When we started pulling that carbon out of the ground, that's when this whole situation started to occur. We threw that carbon up into the atmosphere, and most of what we threw up there, not all of it, but a good deal of it is still up there. That's what's creating the problem. It's not my driving my RAV4 today. The problem is 200 years ago, we started throwing carbon up into the atmosphere, and it's still there. It's creating the situation that we have right now with global warming. So, if we just could, then one of the solutions, and people say, no, we can't do that. Don't focus on that, because if you do, you're going to take resources away from making us, putting it into giving incentives for people to buy electric cars. It's to pull that stuff out of the atmosphere. And every time you see somebody saying, we've got this great idea, and the next thing you say, well, that'll never work. It'll take too much time to get that. Just forget that. Don't even forget about it. Don't even think about that. It's not going to work. Well, why not?
Isn't it being done on a small scale today?
Of course it is, but it's being marginalized, and we're not putting enough effort into removing the CO2 that's up there. I mean, the CO2 that's up there does do some good. I mean, if you look at where we were 4 billion years ago, with the amount of oxygen that we had in the atmosphere back then was almost nothing, an awful lot of methane. And then not suddenly, but over a course of a long period of time, 2 billion years.
Depends the time frame. It might be suddenly on some time frame.
Suddenly we had enough oxygen so people could start breathing. But when the whole thing started 4.2 billion years ago, there wasn't much.
Yeah, I guess the other thing, my point with the 7% of COVID is that even going to the extreme of completely not, in some sense, not driving, not doing all the things and disruption, it's only 7%. The chopping of the coal, the chopping of the petroleum, the chopping of the nuclear out of the energy food chain is much more than 7%. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so, that's, to me, that's part of the fundamental challenge here, is that, this is, we require a certain amount of energy to do what the heck to have the 340 million people in the US maybe be able to feed their families and have a half decent life. I mean, and that's basically whatever it is, 100 quads, or I don't even know what a quad is. It's the number and whatever, but and that's what it is, and it has to come from the various places, and we build up an infrastructure that creates it in various ways. I mean, electricity, you think about it, it's kind of neat the way it works, but if you look at the inefficiencies that are associated with the creation of electrons and then the consumption of the electrons where you need to consume them, I mean, it's not very pretty. I mean, there are losses and whatever and so on all over the darn place. And of course, here in Princeton, we've always thought that thermonuclear fusion was going to be, the solution and so on and whatever. And it may very well be sometime, but that sucker always seems to be 50 years into the future. But guess what? We're back into the nuclear world that essentially is something you can't even mention now. I mean, now they call it hydrogen. Okay, but where does that come from, and so on? You need energy to create it. So anyway, it's tough. It's tough.
We'll be back with more, but first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. ETFs, as you probably know, can be a smart way to spread risk with investments and focus on a particular category of stocks. The website again is motoetf.com. We're back with more of Smart Driving Cars and our guest, Michael Sena. Michael, along the same lines of what we've been talking about, you highlight in the latest Dispatcher a report about Porsche Siemens Energy having a partnership working on a synthetic climate neutral fuel that they call e-fuel. What do we know about this?
Well, it's I think it's a great idea. There's another case where we have alternatives. Think of if every car that was out there right now, instead of running on gasoline or diesel, which puts out emissions at the tailpipe, could run on a fuel that didn't. And why aren't we dealing with 1.4 billion cars rather than trying to make all cars electric? It's going to take more than 15 to 20 years, even if every car could be taken off the roads, which have already been made, which are out there now. 1.4 billion cars out there running on gasoline or diesel. If we could make those cars emission-free, not tomorrow, but maybe next week, instead of waiting to replace all of those. And that's what these guys are doing. And Porsche says, well, we have a good reason for doing this because 70% of the cars that we've built from the day that we started are still on the road. If you have a Porsche, you want that car to continue running. And classic cars, maybe they'd get a pass and they'd be able to run, but to be able to actually use the car on a daily basis. So they're developing a fuel which starts
would work with existing vehicles. Is that the idea?
All cars, any car that's there now. You put it. It's like a biofuel, but it's not made from trees or plants. It's made using an electrolysis process where they split water into oxygen and hydrogen, and then it goes through a couple of other steps, and it ends up being a fuel that goes into your car, and you pump it in exactly the same way as you pump in gas or gasoline or diesel. And they say, well, it's expensive. Well, how much? What's expensive? Well, it would cost about $9 a gallon. Really? That's pretty pretty expensive. How much did you pay for the last time you filled your car up? Was it $2 a gallon, $3 a gallon?
I wish.
It's up to $3.50 in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Darn it.
Well, you know how much I paid the last time I filled my car up here? the equivalent of $7.75 a gallon, and it's going up. Why is it? Well, now we're into the logistics things.
Yeah,
but the price of gasoline.
You're going to buy an electric car next week, so then you won't have to pay that.
No,
go ahead. Go.
No, I'm not. No,
Just think you'll save.
Even if they say. No,
The electricity's free. How can you be so stupid, Michael? Come on, cut it out.
I don't live above the North Circle. Where I live, the electricity is not free. So
Oh,
that's what they're
oops.
doing. That's what they're doing. And the reason that they built this plant, this first plant, Siemens and Porsche together in down in South America, a place in Chile where Ecuador, where the wind blows very much and very hard. So they've got lots of clean energy to make this with.
Well, it sounds fascinating. Well, we have a couple of other headlines to touch on that I think Michael might have a comment or two as well. Yeah. Alan, Hertz sent Tesla shares soaring this week with the announcement that it's ordered 100,000 Tesla vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I found that very interesting. One is that I guess, Elon continues to be a great marketer, and at a time that announcement was made was also the announcement that he had to pull full self-driving off of his beta. And you had exactly at the same time this whatever might be perceived as great, and this whatever that might be perceived as, oh my goodness, he's being a total failure, and the stock goes through the roof. So I don't know if it's
you have a different view though, don't you, of his decision to pull the full self-driving beta?
Yeah, well, no, but it was, from a marketplace point of perspective, I would have thought that was perceived as, my goodness, he's not as good as he is. And on the other one, my goodness, he just cut a great deal that's going to allow a whole additional set of potential buyers to experience his car, and therefore, show up and buy. And it seems as if the way Wall Street responded to this is that, I guess, like any news is good news, I guess, because they combine those two things. And I don't know. Yes, the Hertz news is very good news for him.
And then a couple days later, this was like a complicated sports trade where you give me one player and I'm going to send this player to this other team.
Well,
Uber made a deal launching a partnership with Hertz to take 50,000 of these vehicles as a rental option for its drivers.
Yeah, I know. And to me, that thing just that sort of then that suggests that the whole deal is put together. I guess Hertz is out there making sure that they somehow survive, because they're just coming out of bankruptcy, and somebody wonders whether or not, I don't know, I haven't looked at their balance sheet closely, and whether or not there's anything real there. And then they go with the other guy who's on life support, Uber, and they pump together another pump and dump. But that's what that one seems like. Again, what does that do for Uber? Uber is going to go have gig workers go and acquire Teslas. Great. I guess that's for their super expensive Ubers that are in San Francisco. I guess they're the only folks that use those. And I guess I always thought that Uber was a great idea if it could scale. And scale means providing, affordable mobility to a whole heck of a lot of people, as opposed to very expensive mobility to the super rich. And this is now, to me, seems like an infusion, a push to go after the super rich again. And they can, I guess, make a profit there. The problem is, I don't think they can scale there. So they can be a very nice little niche company, with a cap value of who knows what small amount. But how can they possibly be worth any sizable cap? Just serving the super, I don't know. It's I think it's a limousine service for Las Vegas and San Francisco and Silicon Valley.
Well, the Uber drivers can rent a Tesla through Hertz starting this coming Monday in LA, San Francisco, San Diego, and Washington, D.C., they're saying, with more cities to come.
Yeah.
And the price is going to be $334 a week. That
Yeah.
includes insurance and maintenance. And Uber says that the price may come down somewhat as this program
Yeah,
expands.
and there's I'm sure all sorts of nice promotionals up front and so on. And I think what one has to then look is to the extent that such a thing is sustainable, and for whom and what, and you know, go through the details of that darn thing. It is bling. It's a lot of bling on a particular segment of the marketplace. And I think whenever you see, at least whenever I see bling, I have to, you know, put on some sunglasses and see what's really there, because you know, sure, in the short term, this is like, wow, whoa, you know, I was happy to see it. You know, I bought a few shares of Tesla a few months ago. You know, I was a happy camper. I thought, whoa, I mean, wow. I thought that not having full self-driving was gonna, you know, so I made $2, but you know.
Michael?
I have no comments on the Hertz thing. I mean, the whole business with the business model for rental cars is very complicated, and Hertz is hurting, and as all rental car companies have been hurting, because of their primary market has been people who travel, and like I did for years, whenever I would get into a plane, I knew that at the other end I'd have a visit to the rental car company.
And you had your travel was being paid by somebody else.
Yeah, my travel was
So
being paid by somebody else.
you know,
yeah.
other people's money. OPM is
Yeah,
wonderful way
exactly.
to do business. Okay, you know, whatever. And I'm sure you cared, but some people cared more about the perks that they got out the other side that weren't taxed by the tax system, and the company let you keep them, and so on. And the companies got ripped off by their employees doing that. But you know, I think if you did all the accounting on that, you would find that that's exactly what happened. But you know, with those folks not out there with using other people's money to do their transactions, the rental car companies have found it a very tough go. So now when you go to rent a car, it is expensive. And if you don't have other people's money to pay for it, and
But
boy, it's really nice to have Uber and Lyft out there. And but how long is that sucker gonna last? Because those folks want to be paid too. So I tip them nicely whenever I use them.
What I was prefacing, what Tesla saying, we're going to take our beta off the market. We're going to take it away from the customers who paid for it and who are testing it for us, because it turns out it's not working very well. This was a pure political move. I mean, he's had the opportunity to do this for the last 6 years, 7 years, since they started putting this on the market. This is a pure political move on his part, because of the situation he got himself in. Talk about doing dumb things. The first person you don't want to get off your side, she wasn't on his side to begin with, but to come out with a tweet when Missy Cummings was appointed as the strategic advisor to NHTSA, you know, and to come out with a really stupid comment, and everybody just pounced on that. So what are you doing? I mean, she's a decent person. She knows what she's doing. And
she's a very competent person. She's been there.
She's extremely competent. She knows what she knows what she's talking about. And for someone how dumb can you be?
I mean,
the first thing you don't do is to make a comment. If of course she's been, so have I. I mean, I've
So
been,
I think I
yeah.
have too. Haven't I, or
But I,
whatever.
I haven't. I'm not in his. Definitely not in his crosswords. If he ever read the stuff that I write about him, I mean, he'd probably be suing me. But at this point,
But they are
Yeah,
still under the gun from the NTSB as well. I mean, more
sure.
comments all the time about.
Yeah,
absolutely,
no,
yeah, and should be,
it should
and
be,
should be.
but I'd say, Michael, I think it's brilliant of him to do this, because he's finally listening, he's finally doing it, and I think what happened, or what seems to have happened, is that 10.3, the latest release, had it so that the automated emergency braking system wasn't turned off when you turned that sucker on. I think. I don't know if that's true. So I'm sure hopefully somebody listening will correct me and send me an email and say that's not true. But all of a sudden, the folks that were beta testing it, all of a sudden ran into the issues with the automated emergency braking system. The braking business of Tesla's being spooked, let's use that term, by stationary objects ahead, that the automated emergency braking system should, if it thinks that there's a stationary object, certainly begin to slow you down if you're going at whatever. These systems they were turned off if you're going over, I guess what NHTSA tests them at 12 and 24 miles an hour, and maybe 40 miles an hour, which is what Volvo was doing, and so on. Why? Because the false alarm aspects of stationary objects, which are all over the place as you're driving down the road all the time, that false alarm rate does not have to be very large for the brakes to be tapped every once in a while. When the brakes are tapped, depending on, hey, every 20th of a second or whatever, you recover and you untap, do whether or not you even sense it, and so on and so forth. All of a sudden, became such that, holy mackerel, I mean, his most fervent testers were out there, holy hell, this damn thing's not working. One of the observations that I've had watching the videos that people have posted of the 1.3, even the 10.3, even the 10.2 release, is that you're driving down the road, you watch the animation or the representation of what the perception system is actually thinks that it sees out there. You see a bunch of cars, you see the pedestrians, you see the traffic lights, you see even a couple of trees and posts and so on and so forth, and it looks really good until you approach an underpass. Okay, and I don't believe they've ever displayed in that image that the overpass, or you're going under it. They never display it. Why? Because they disregard it. Why? Because it's a stationary object ahead. I have never seen one of these animations. Hey, I haven't looked at all that many, but ones that I've seen, such that the vehicle is approaching and there's a stationary object in the lane ahead, it doesn't show it. It disregards it. Okay. And that's why it doesn't show. I think it's in the code.
And now hopefully they're going to be addressing that.
Now, hopefully now he finally realizes that all the great things about full self-driving, it's able to do the signs, it's able to do the traffic lights, it's able to do the turning movements, it's able to anticipate where the other cars are going, the pedestrians, the bicyclists, all the things that you really need to do all that. All of a sudden, he may go back and, oh my goodness, what about all these other stationary objects that I could get myself into trouble, that I sort of just, I assume they really weren't there. This was a false alarm. You would go by it. Maybe he'll go back and get those things to work. So when it's not a false alarm, you're not Jonathan Brown.
Well, Alan, we want to remind our audience that the next Smart Driving Cars Summit is now set for May. We had originally hoped to have it in November, but it's off until May. and the people can stay tuned for much more on that.
Yeah, right. At one point, I had the audacity to think that even tonight we were going to start it on, yeah. I think it was like I don't know. No, a week from tonight.
From
I mean,
tonight,
I'd be going nuts if that was the case. Yeah, we are. I must admit that we're just having a wonderful reception in terms of the thoughts of actually trying to bring equitable, affordable, high quality mobility to Trenton. We're involved in talking with the people that live there and the people that have businesses there, and it's just it's heartwarming, the wonderful reception that we're getting. So hopefully by next spring, we can have the technology companies taking us seriously, and we can have people coming here and trying to do that little bit. We're not going to solve the climate crisis with it. We're not gonna do that, but at least we'll start focusing this technology on some valuable contributions, which is improving the quality of life of some people that have been left behind by all the gas guzzling vehicles that we put out there.
Michael, we want to thank you once again for sharing all of your insights. Always terrific. And the website is michaelsena.com.
Yes, thank you,
Michael, and please get better. Hope your knee gets better, and of course it will get better, and get back out there. And I guess you saw last weekend, boy, did we steal one from Harvard. I mean, it was so wonderful.
you didn't see it. You weren't able to go to the game.
I wasn't able to go to the game because I was at my daughter's field hockey game, and but the president showed up in the middle of the first quarter and watched it for 3 quarters standing there, and then had his picture taken with my daughter's team, and it was so. I also had fun.
Good.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Smart ETFs, Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more info is available at motoetf.com. You can find us, once again, at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you turn to for podcasts. That smart speaker can play us too. You can find my tech reports at textination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with Alain Kornhauser. Thanks for listening or watching, and please stay safe.
Thank you all. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.